I'm Lynn O'Shaughnessy at the College Solution, and I invited my friend Janine Robinson, who has a great website, essayhell.com. In fact, whenever I recommend that people go to your website, people laugh when I say the name Essay Hell. I don't, I don't know if you get that reaction from people, but
they're probably in it, right?
yeah, exactly. It totally describes, I'm sure, the feelings that teenagers have when they're facing this, you know, huge, what they consider a huge burden, right, of writing the darn college essay or essays oftentimes. So
Right.
anyway, Janine not only has a website where you can, she's got lots of blog posts that provide incredible information for students who want to learn how to do write a great essay, and she also has some ebooks that you can find on her website, essayhell.com. But I thought today I would, ask Janine for some tips that could help these teenagers who are struggling to come up with a good college essay. So anyway, Janine, maybe one of the things I'd seen that you've done recently is a blog post that talks about your 10 favorite tips for writing a good essay. And I think those are, there's some great advice there. Maybe you could talk about some of these tips, including one, don't write a boring essay, right? And don't write an essay that includes too much information, right? And I think, so maybe you could just talk about that.
Yeah. That is probably one of the biggest pitfalls writing these essays, is that students feel so much pressure to impress the admissions folks with their essay that they feel the need a lot of times to just cram in as much, about their impressive accomplishments, activities, and so they overload them. And what happens is they're very boring to read about.
Mm-hmm.
And the general rule of thumb with writing is that if you write something that's very general and try to say too much about everything, you end up saying nothing
Mm-hmm.
with any meaning. So the trick with these essays is to focus your topic. And that means that you a lot of times just have to pick something specific about yourself or something that happened and write about that. And when you do that, the beauty of that is that you start with something specific, but then as you go on in your essay, then you can broaden out and go deeper with your topic and show your insights and how you think about
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
It's challenging to do that,
Mm-hmm.
because of the pressure to think that you need to impress
Right.
the reader.
Right. And another great advice I think you give is this can be a very mundane topic, right? You don't have to have it be some spectacular thing you've done. Most kids haven't done anything that's that spectacular anyway, right? I mean, maybe you could
Right.
talk
None
about
of us have,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Maybe you could, give some examples of what kids write about that you think have been a nice essay and a great read, which I think is something else I think kids have to think about is, wow, these admission staffers, sometimes they're reading dozens of these darn essays every day, and they're probably
Hundreds.
falling asleep, right? So getting one that grabs their
Right.
attention is important.
A lot of those amazing accomplishments, say you climbed a mountain or you won the state championship, those are great, or you went to China and worked with orphans. Those are great things, great accomplishments, but to read about them, it's just not that interesting unless the writer picks and zooms in on something specific that happened during that, big momentous event or whatever. Focuses in on something that happened, and then that's interesting to read about. So I just say, think about what engages you. What do you like to read about? Do you want to read about somebody who just loves walking through the woods on a backpack trip?
Mm-hmm.
It's just not that interesting.
Right.
What makes things interesting are, when things kind of go a little sideways. And that's one of my tips, is when you're looking for some sort of real life moment or incident or
Mm-hmm.
event that you can use as a springboard,
Mm-hmm.
to write your essay about yourself or some part of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is to think of a time that you had a problem, that you confronted some type of an obstacle, that you made a mistake, that there was a life change. Um, maybe you moved 5 times growing up. Um, that's what's interesting. That's what we like to hear about.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. Sadly, it's just not that interesting when everything's going okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's one thing that always works, and it's the one time in your life when you did have a problem or something went wrong that it's a good thing,
right,
because it makes a great story.
Right. I think another one of your great tips is, start in the middle of the action when you start an essay.
Right.
Like, don't back into it.
Right. Right. A lot of times, so basically I advise the students to think of some quality or characteristic that you would like to showcase about yourself in your essay. These are for those essays that are more personal statement. It's an essay that's supposed to, show us who you are, those type of prompts. And so what I often say is, instead of say you want to say you're a very creative person, instead of starting your essay by saying, I'm a very creative person, I've always done creative things, and build up to it, instead, think of a time or a moment or an example of when you did something creative, of a time when you were creative, and start with that. And a lot of times, and that's a great way to sort of naturally grab your reader, that it's a little mini story, and it just will naturally draw in your reader. They'll care about you. They'll care about what you have to say after that. There's a word, they're called anecdotes. It's where you look back in your past and you find a little real life moment or event that you can describe and use that to launch your essay. A lot of times, I'm sure English teachers talk about this idea of show, don't tell. And that's really what you're doing. Instead of telling about yourself, say how creative you are, you're showing by picking an example of that. It's just much more interesting to read about.
Now, can you give an example of an essay that you seen or worked with students that started with right out of the gate, there's some action there, and then that would grab the reader?
Yeah, I mean, I have a collection of essays from students that I've worked with, and almost all of those sort of use that approach. And there was one essay, it was about a student, he was just determined to write about being on crew. And typically writing about sports is sort of it's an overdone topic. Often, it's just too general. They get too many essays like that. So I try to steer them away from that topic. But he was insistent because he said that his experience rowing crew was so defining for him. So I'm like, okay, if you feel that strongly, but let's find something specific about that. So we brainstormed, and he sort of came up with this idea that to do crew, he learned you have to be a little crazy. In his word, crazy meaning you have to be just so intense. So I said, well, okay, can you think of an example or a time when you were training for crew that you could use and capture and start your essay to show us just how you have to be crazy. So he did. He pulled out, instead of backing up and leading into it, he just put us in the moment of a time that they were out in the water. They'd been out there for 5 hours straight. He was about to pass out from exhaustion, and he even put a little quote of his coach saying, keep rowing, do I have to call 911? So he just used these little descriptors. He sort of recreated that scene in that moment to show us just how crazy he had to be. And then he went on with his essay to talk about how that quality of learning to be that disciplined and that intense about something that you care about can apply to other things in your life, and be a really positive quality. So, but that was the trick, and he just jumped right into that moment, sort of plucked out of time.
Yeah.
And then you background it.
Right. Right. That sounds great. My daughter said something similar. She, I know what you had said about be very leery about writing about sports. and she was a soccer player. But what she wrote about, and I thought it was okay because what she wrote about was like this failure she had, which she had been on this top team, soccer team in San Diego, and one of the best in Southern California. And there was a new coach came in, and he cut her from the team, and she was the only one.
Oh, right.
She was the only one cut, and she was devastated. And she ended up scrambling and finding a team that was largely Hispanic team, and they weren't really wild about this girl who wasn't Hispanic coming on the team. And so she kind of started it at one of the like team picnic early in the season where they were all eating pizza and they were talking assuming that Kaylin didn't know Spanish, and so she ended up talking to them in Spanish and they were all surprised. And
That's perfect.
And her experience on this team, she came to love these girls. They ended up embracing her, and the experience just being with this Hispanic team and ended up influencing her decision to become a Spanish major. So I thought
that's a great example. Yep, a great example of how you can take what could be some college experts, flag as an overdone or cliche topic,
right.
But as long as you can find something within that general topic,
mm-hmm.
and the way she pulled out that moment of that time eating pizza,
right.
It's so everyday,
right.
To show just
right.
what that felt like.
Right.
I'm sure that sharing how you feel, especially if it's at a weak moment,
right. Right.
can really make us care about you.
Right.
And that sounds like a great essay.
Yeah. Well, she got into the school she wanted to, and she ended up becoming a Spanish.
All right.
She was a Spanish major. She really did follow through with that.
Oh my gosh. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So that, to me, that is a great essay when you get into school.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
How do you ever really know?
Yeah.
But I just think as long as you try to stick, be true to some of a quality that you have or characteristic that is defining or really unique to
mm-hmm.
who you are,
mm-hmm.
and then delve deep into that to find some moments or examples that showcase that, you're going to have an essay that captures who you are, and I like to think that it will actually help you not just get into your dream school, but get into the school that's right for
mm-hmm.
you, because the more accurately you can represent yourself,
right.
That helps admissions counselors do their job in picking who they think will be the best
right.
fit at their schools too. I like to think that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I got another question. What about topics that are some other topics that maybe are kind of dangerous to try to, like death or divorce or things like that? Do you have any advice about?
The Common App, the first prompt, describe something in your background or a story, that's central to who you are. I can't quote it exactly, but it's really they're asking you for a defining moment
mm-hmm.
or your background. And it seems like kids sort of fall into two different groups in general. There's the students that have had those momentous events or experiences
mm-hmm.
in their life where they have lost a loved one, or somebody in their family's been very ill or had some sort of condition that's really affected them as well. And a lot of those they used to flag and say, oh, don't write about divorce or death, it's too intense. And I don't believe that. I think, like anything, it's how you handle it and what you have to say about
mm-hmm.
it. But for a lot of students that have had that, it's almost as though they can't help but write
mm-hmm.
about that. And
right.
some of the best essays are about those topics. And then there's students that, so far so good. Everything's gone well, and they're the ones that sort of freak out and go, I don't have anything, I don't have any drama to write about.
Right.
But that's where, you just shift and you look at who you are and your defining qualities, and look for those everyday experiences.
Right.
Can make just as great of an essay
right.
as losing a parent. On the other end are essays that are about somebody's obsession with karaoke,
mm-hmm.
or somebody that loves to ride the public bus, Um, somebody that has excessive body hair. I mean, those very simple little qualities or idiosyncrasies can make great essays as well, especially if to you they define you in some way.
Right.
So a lot of it is doing the brainstorming
Right.
and sort of having an idea of what you're looking
Right.
for before you.
And I think narrow it down
it's
instead of thinking broadly, which I think is what freaks a lot of
trying to
people
be-
out. Yeah.
freaks you out, and just having that open-ended blank page intimidates everybody.
Right.
But I think a lot of it is if you can sort of calm down. I really like to steer students to reading sample essays. I don't think it means you're going to copy them. I think it's just a great way to see the style that they're written in, because these are a different style.
Right.
They are not your 5-paragraph academic, compare and contrast a theme essays that most students are taught in English class.
Right.
It's a more casual style. You write a little more like you talk, and so they're it's if you read sample essays, then you can get a sense of the style and how students handle these topics.
Right.
You can also get ideas. You'll say, oh my gosh, that person wrote about having freckles. Maybe I have something like that about me that I could write about that would make a great
Right.
essay.
And of course, you have an ebook that has a lot of essays, sample essays on them too,
Yes,
which should be
helpful
for
it's
people.
called Heavenly Essays.
Yeah. So.
Plugging my book.
Yeah, no.
But there's you can just Google sample
Right.
essays online as
you
well.
can. Right.
Not just mine, but I would say make sure that trust your own instinct. Copy an essay or a style of the essay that you like. If you read an essay and it's boring, it's not a good essay.
Right.
So trust yourself. What interests you, engages you. That's what you want to try to replicate in your essay.
Right. Yeah. I had one of a family friend who was struggling with what to write. He wrote he's now a sophomore at Skidmore College, but he was agonized for a long time, and he finally ended up writing about one of these mundane topics. His dad was from Mexico, and but James had never he was pretty darn American, right? He was kind of removed from his dad's experience, and he talked about eating tacos with his dad, and like I think it was brain and tongue tacos, right? And his dad loved these tacos, right? And like James is like, oh my God, he's trying to swallow the tongue taco and he's just kind of gagging on it. But then he talked about his relationship with his dad and all that. It was really a lovely essay. In fact,
that's great.
One school, I think it was Lawrence University, asked if they could use it, on their website. It's an example of a really good essay. But it's just, gagging down tacos was basically.
Right. Well, that's just that little mundane. Mundane means every day. Just common, simple, basic experience. He didn't try to write about my experience with my dad, and he didn't. It sounds like he zeroed in on that one little moment of eating these tacos and why it was a problem, a challenge.
Right.
And so, of course, we're interested.
Right.
We've all had that awkward moment, so we can relate.
Right.
It sounds perfect. And then it's a springboard for him after he shares that moment, then to reflect and, analyze and sort of toss around some of the other ideas and concepts.
Right. And I think it's more
about his relationship with his dad.
And I think it's easier. It's more fun. I mean, I think everybody can come up with an anecdote about something, right? That's, I think, much easier way to start off something than thinking globally. That's just, no wonder that terrorizes students. So
no, it is. It's just a very. There's enough pressure on students as it is,
right.
And these essays just sort of hang out there. But for what it's worth, I have never had a student who couldn't come up with a great topic. Once they kind of calmed down and just sort of thought about their past and came up with a little list of qualities that define them. What are you about? Are you competitive? Are you creative? Are you a perfectionist? And once you come up with a short list of those, then start sort of trying to think of little times in your
Mm-hmm.
past that are examples of
Mm-hmm.
how you are that way. And you'll be surprised how many little moments you'll think of.
Yeah.
And again, they don't have to be wow, impressive. It's those little simple ones that you remember and think of as kind of, a lot of times they can be sort of funny in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this guy that was eating the tongue tacos.
Right.
It's entertaining in a way.
Right. Right.
So,
Okay, great. One next thing I wanted to ask you is, like, do you have any advice on just getting started, like getting kids to like sit down and start thinking about this? I mean,
um, just to get started. I think again, a lot of the reason I know a lot of reason, when I procrastinate on something, it's because it feels so open. I don't know how to actually start. I think it's going to take forever, so I think I have to just have this perfect hunk of time. The reality is once you can kind of latch onto a topic that you like,
mm-hmm.
I think just give yourself, okay, I'm going to sit down for half an hour, and I don't use a whole formal outline, but maybe map out the points that you want to
Mm-hmm.
make. Just number them, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, to give yourself a little guideline, and then write out your rough draft. That can take a half hour.
Mm-hmm.
You writing, once you get going and you have an idea of what you want to say,
Mm-hmm.
it just does not have to take weeks and months.
Right. Right.
And of course, you as a writer know once you have your rough draft out, and don't try on that first go round to make it
Right.
perfect. Get your ideas out, get away from it, come back, read it, and then you fix it. Oh, I already said that. Take that out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is more interesting. Why don't I try that up higher? Those kind of things.
Right.
So you rework it. But
All right.
the brainstorming and finding a topic, I think, is the biggest
Right.
challenge, because once you find one you like, writing it. Actually, a lot of kids, I think, once they find a topic that they like, and it's a story they sort
Mm-hmm.
of want to tell, it's not that
Mm-hmm.
grueling. I mean,
Right.
they actually sort of want to do
Right.
it.
Once they get to that. Okay,
So,
great. Well, that was great advice, Janine. Janine,
yeah.
you can find Janine at essayhell.com. Great advice on her blog posts, and also she's got ebooks that I would urge you to check out if you want to make the college essay process as painless as possible. So,
it doesn't. You can escape essay hell.
with Janine Robinson.
There is
you
life.
go.
Yes, with Janine. There is life after these essays.
Okay.
So
All right.
anyway, well, thanks,
Well,
Lynn.
thank you. Okay, bye.